So, I was fairly critical of last week's episode, but they rebounded this week with a really fun and funny episode. Harley set out to steal a weather machine to show the Legion of Doom she was worthy to join their ranks. But while a weather machine is an overdone trope in superhero stories, rest assured, it was most definitely a MacGuffin more than anything else. The real story was that Harley and her crew dealing with someone who, as Ivy said, is cable bad, while Harley and the rest of her crew are broadcast bad, which translates into, as we found out, some of the most graphic violence seen on this show, and that's saying something. Wanda Sykes was as hilarious this time as she was in her last appearance, maybe even more so as the bad-as-can-be Queen of Fables, who was released from imprisonment in a tax book, free once more with a bit of help escaping from our anti-hero in Harley. But Harley quickly finds out the Queen may be more bad than Harley and company bargained for. Which brings me to the site of the Queen of Fables massacre in this episode, the Praxis family reunion. I thought that name sounded familiar when they said it, but it wasn't until we saw Praxis the hero that I finally made the connection. For anyone who doesn't know or remember, which I'm betting is a whole lot of people, Praxis actually is a character from the comic books. He originally appeared in the Spectre storyline in 1989, but is arguably slightly better known as a member of the Booster Gold-led team, The Conglomerate. And when I say better known, I mean if you actually ever heard of him at all. He appeared in some issues of the Justice League Quarterly series, and even got a solo backup feature briefly in that book before disappearing altogether. Not counting DC Comics encyclopedia-type books, he hasn't appeared in the comic books since 1994 that I can remember or can find mention of. He was changed a lot from the comic books, probably more than anyone adapted for the show so far, which is saying a lot, as his origin was completely different, not surprisingly, as well as he did not have electric powers in the books, but had more mental powers such as telekinesis and psionic powers. But the changes served the joke with the story well, and honestly, I always get a kick out of seeing a forgotten D-list comic character actually get adapted into animation or live action. So seeing him was one heck of a deep cut, but a welcome one. And speaking of deep cuts, as I awkwardly transitioned, that death of his was one heck of a graphic one, even for this show. I say in almost every review, but this show, definitely not for kids, even if it did have a cameo by the Three Little Pigs. As far as other things I liked about this episode, the mention of Cord Industries was cool here, just like when they drop a mention of Cord Industries in the Arrowverse. But like there, we don't actually get to see Ted Cord appear. DC doesn't seem to want to adapt him, although word is a Blue Beetle show is in the work for HBO Max, although I believe that's going to be the Jaime Reyes version, but they sure like to name Cord Industries. I also enjoyed the subplot with Ivy and Kiteman dating, and Ivy coming to terms with dating someone who would seem at first glance to not be in her league. At all. It was a nice, surprisingly touching storyline for all of its laughs, and the characters are hilarious together. Some fans are not liking this, as it seems to imply we won't be getting a Harley-Ivy romance or implications of one like in the comics, despite some interviews before the show came out implying we would. But this storyline would imply, at least with this batch of episodes, that doesn't seem to be where the show is headed. This episode was not completely without its flaws, as none of them are. The idea of Harley and her crew having a hard time dealing with someone as evil as Queen of Fables was a bit of a stretch, honestly. I mean, arguably, they never committed that kind of unnecessary mass murder, but given some of the things we have seen them do, and the fact Harley was with the Joker before, and the concept that Harley had the kind of problems she did with Queen of Fables' methods, falls apart under any scrutiny. But the story itself was so much fun, I was willing to not go too deep into it. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, feel free to check out my review of the last episode of Harley Quinn, and you can also check out my review of the Stargirl trailer. I'm Dan the Man, and I'll see you next time.